Good morning from San Diego. Welcome and thanks for tuning in. I'm Elaine Duzatzina. I'm the host of Evoke Strong Life. This is Health Transformation Stories. And joining me today is Kyla Thorne. She lives currently in Tennessee, and she actually comes from Ontario, Canada. But she's a stay-at-home mom, a work-from-home mom, and also a homeschool mom. to a daughter and a son. And she's passionate about addressing the root cause behind our health struggles, because this is what changed her life after being diagnosed with Hashimoto's, as well as depression and anxiety that stems from what is known as religious trauma. And we're going to talk more about that as we go along here. And this journey of restoring her health led her to her studies at the Institute of Integrative Nutrition and is now an IIN certified health coach. Kyla, welcome to my show. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I love the introduction. I sound so educated.
Well, you are. Well, I like to go ahead and dive into your story. I like to go back to way before you even had your health issues. What was your life like then? What was your lifestyle like? And we'll start from there.
So it's a really interesting place to start, because when I read that question and hear that question from you, I'm like, you know what? There was actually never a time in my life that I didn't have health issues. Mm-hmm. I did, even when I was a small child, I had dairy allergies. I was a really whiny child. So my mom says that she could say, Kyla, come here. And I burst into tears. I was so emotionally, I was fragile. And some people suggested to my mom that it could be a dairy allergy. And this is, 30 years ago or more. And so it wasn't popular back then like it is now to talk about things like this. Mm-hmm. And they brushed it off, but they eventually got desperate and tried it. And I was a different child. Going off of the dairy, I was a different child. And so as a family, we got off of dairy and all sorts of health problems fell away. But I still remember as a child and as a teen, as an early adult, struggling with feeling tired and having extra weight and some skin problems, but not enough that we were really concerned about it. So overall, we thought I was healthy. So that's probably the period of my life you're referring to, when I was busy just living life. I grew up in kind of country life, homeschooled, gardening. Mm-hmm. My mom was a health enthusiast, so she would do lectures and trainings around using water therapy, hydrotherapy, around using herbs, cooking classes. I was actually a vegan vegetarian from the age of 5, and we ate in bulk. We had, big bags, like 50-pound bags of oats, and we'd have big bags of rice and flaxseed, and our pantry was a room with these big buckets in it. We ate really, really healthy, and I was pretty active, not necessarily exercise-wise, but in my day-to-day life and in my work, just busy learning, going to school, does that answer your question?
Oh, yeah. It sounds like your mom was ahead of her times. I mean, she was doing a lot of things that are more mainstream nowadays. People are recognizing the importance of, living in nature and gardening and, all of that. But you mentioned, via email, how 10 years ago you were in, you were suffering from a lot of stress. Would you like to talk about that part of your life?
Yeah, so when I went to college and then to missionary school, I ended up getting trained in missionary work and being in ministry. And so I was doing this. I had moved to Tennessee, and I was doing Bible study work, working in a church, preaching, doing door-to-door work, and all these things, running training programs for young people on how to do missionary work, and just very involved in church. And some things ended up happening in the church, which is not unusual, but several stressful things happened around the same time. And I started to notice that I was getting heart palpitations. I was also tired, but I was feeling these funny feelings in my chest. And so my friends and my family became very alarmed. And we ended up, I didn't have health insurance because I was Canadian living in the United States, didn't have health insurance. And some friends ended up, so a friend of a friend was a cardiologist and took me in and, did the tests on my heart and everything. We ended up discovering that my heart actually wasn't the problem. And so I just kept pushing.
Right. So there wasn't anything wrong with your heart at all, and you just decided to continue to do the work that you were doing before.
Yeah, I mean, he did say I had a slight mitral valve prolapse, but he didn't feel like what I was experiencing was related to that. So he sent me home with a list of maybe remove soy from your diet. I don't know, a little sticky note of maybe some recommendations. But I didn't do extensive work with him because of not having insurance and things. So yeah, I just continued on with my life. I just kept doing my work. I actually moved to another state to start a new job and, sign a lease and everything. And then it was 2.5 months into that, I think, new lease, new state, new job and everything, that I ended up that I just couldn't continue on. I was feeling so tired. And so all this, it was actually anxiety is what it was. And we thought it was my heart. I was feeling so anxious, having so many panic attacks, anxiety attacks. I ended up quitting my job as an adult and moving back to Canada with my parents, just because I didn't know what else to do.
Right. And at that period of time, so you went back because you felt that you needed to take a break. Is that a reason why?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I couldn't keep going. I didn't really know what was wrong with me. And so when I got back to Canada, in Ontario, we're kind of known for our health insurance, our free health insurance, and the doctor. So once I was there, I was able to see a doctor for free. And so she squeezed me in and saw me, and I spent just a few minutes with her, and she diagnosed me with depression and anxiety on the spot, just within a few minutes of knowing me, and wanted to put me on, medication for it. But because of the history that I explained with growing up in a home where we did alternative medicine, it didn't feel right. To choose a medication. I wanted to see if instead maybe I could approach this in a natural way. Maybe I could do things to help with my depression and anxiety naturally.
And so you wanted, because of how you were raised, and this is what you wanted to try out initially.
Yeah.
And what were the things that you were doing, if you don't mind sharing, as to...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So before I answer that, I think there's a place for natural, natural things. But I'm not saying that, I also probably had an extreme view of not listening to doctors and not taking their advice, because my mom was so ahead of her time, and because the doctors at that time, or at least our doctor, kind of thought we were weird for how we ate and what we did. I had grown up with a distrust of doctors, and so automatically I went there for my diagnosis. I felt like I had to take things into my own hands. And so, this is going back a lot of years. So I don't remember exactly, but I do remember exercising. I do remember eating a heavier breakfast, so focusing more on balancing my blood sugars, with starting the day instead of with grains and fruits, starting it with beans and vegetables and grains for breakfast. And so those are the two main things I remember doing. I do remember also, when I was back still in the States, taking some supplements and things, but I think those were for my heart. I think I was taking supplements for my heart, so not sure that made any difference.
Yeah. Well, thanks for mentioning that. People have their own beliefs and their own what they want, how they want to approach their illnesses. And yes, you should listen to your doctor, but then you also have your own set of beliefs. So you follow what your mind and your heart, where you want to go with that. And it's up to if you know yourself the best, you're the expert of your own life, and you decide on your own what you want to do with the advice that you're receiving from health professionals, from medical professionals. And that's why I like sharing the different stories on here, because everybody has their own approach and what works for them. And this is your story, and this is what worked for you. So
yeah.
So once you started trying the natural way, or going towards a natural path, how did that make a difference for you? How were you feeling, and how did you move forward from that?
So I do remember that I lost some weight because I was doing a lot of exercising, and eating the heavier meal for breakfast helped. So I do remember losing some weight. I do remember that the bigger breakfast did just help me feel a bit better, but it didn't fix it. I ended up moving back to the States, because by this time I was in a relationship with my now husband, and he lived in the States. And so I went back there to visit. I'm still here. And so I was still feeling horrible. I felt depressed. I didn't know it was depression for a long time. But just that tired, sad, anxious, groggy, brain foggy. Yeah. I cried a lot. Yeah. I felt hopeless a lot. I felt really sad a lot. I remember times when my husband would come and be like, come on, you need to eat. Come and eat. It will help you feel better. I remember sitting on the floor with dirty, used tissues surrounding me, and just so much sadness. And I know some of that was related to things I was going through, but I do now see how it was exaggerated because of my health condition. And so, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Continue.
So, I was in the States then, back in the States, when I ended up being diagnosed with the diagnosis that I'll get to. My mom had a friend back in Canada who's a naturopathic doctor, and I had friends who were midwives down in the States. And so I was complaining one day that to my friend who's younger than me and is a midwife, and just telling her, my throat feels funny, like a tightness around it. And she says, that sounds like your thyroid. She said, come over this afternoon and I'll take your blood work. We'll do your blood work. So we go over to her house later. She takes my blood, sends it into the lab. And when it came back, my blood work was bad. My thyroid was so low. And I ended up sending the blood work, I guess, to this naturopathic doctor in Canada, and he ended up diagnosing me by email with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, giving me some recommendations for diet and supplementation, which I dabbled in. But at that point, I was feeling so incapacitated. Right. And I don't think I was honest enough with the people around me as to how bad I felt. And so it kind of just floundered with it for a long time.
Yeah. For Hashimoto's symptoms, one of the symptoms is extreme lethargy. Is that right?
I all of a sudden can't hear you.
There is some... Can you hear me now? There's like a...
I can hear you now. Yes, it's good.
Sounds almost like a lawnmower.
There is a lawnmower outside my window. Perfect timing. There's a lawnmower outside my window.
Okay. I was wondering where that.
My husband is getting a new dealership.
Where that sound was coming from. It's like.
Yeah.
So for Hashimoto's, I've learned that one of the symptoms is like extreme lethargy. Is that correct? Can you hear me?
I think it's just my internet. My internet went crazy. Like you're in and out. He's gone. I don't think he's affecting it. Go ahead one more time. I'm sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, for Hashimoto's, so you've been experiencing tiredness, and that's one of the symptoms, right?
Yes.
Yeah. What else is associated with Hashimoto's? If you don't mind talking about that.
Yeah, so basically what Hashimoto's is it's an autoimmune illness that affects your thyroid. So it's your body's attacking the thyroid. So, and your thyroid governs like so many things, right? So fatigue, depression, oftentimes constipation, dry skin and hair, brittle nails, brain fog, if I didn't mention that. I don't have brain fog, but I might repeat myself. Yeah, those are feeling cold, like easily cold, being intolerant to heat or cold, things like that.
Yeah. So were you able to connect the depression to your autoimmune illness? Was that kind of like, oh, I wonder if it's connected, or was it a separate diagnosis for you? Well, yeah, you were diagnosed beforehand with depression, but then I was wondering if you were able to connect it then.
I'll tell you about how I made the connection. So, like I told you, I was floundering with this whole, gluten-free thing.
Right.
And we ended up, I don't know why, but I ended up getting a second opinion. We had another family doctor another friend of the family doctor who lived in North Carolina, and which was not as far from where I lived. And I ended up getting my blood work sent to him and ended up doing more of a professional relationship, like where we met over the phone. And so I was under his care, whereas before it was like, by email, someone sent me some recommendations. And so he gave me, which was what I guess I needed. I needed to be told what to do. Like, look, this is your problem. This is what I want you to do. I'm sending you in the mail these supplements. I want you to take these supplements. I want you to do this, and we'll reconnect. And so by this time, I'd had my daughter, and by this time, I'd actually had my son. And so it was kind of a re-diagnosis. Okay, let's take this seriously.
Right.
And so one of the recommendations was to be completely gluten-free, which I had played with and noticed benefits. But gluten-free, I think he said soy-free, and I was already pretty much dairy-free, and I was a vegetarian. So I went gluten-free.
Right.
And I was taking the supplements, which I'm not sure really helped me because they were an herbal blend, iodoral, iodine, which there is differing views on whether Hashimoto's people should actually take iodine or have iodine. And so, sorry.
Okay.
This is real life. So what ended up happening was that I noticed within just a few days of following his instructions of being completely gluten-free, that my depression significantly decreased and my fatigue went from fatigue to just not super energetic. So it literally lifted the major depression and lifted the fatigue to where I was still struggling some with my moods and my depression, but not nearly so severely, and I actually had some energy. So that is when I think probably the first time I noticed, oh, wow, this is directly connected.
Right.
So it was the second time I noticed again. Do you want me to jump again to that?
Go ahead.
Jump ahead to that. So I was, I was still staying gluten-free, trying to follow these different diet restrictions that seemed to help me. I was trying to be soy-free. I was gluten-free. And I was noticing that I was still struggling. I was still struggling with tiredness. I was struggling with depression, and still had times that I wished that I hadn't been born. I don't know whether to say I actually had suicidal thoughts, because I'm not sure how to define that. But I know I had a lot of times when it's like, I wish I wasn't alive. I wish I hadn't been born. This is so hard. And there was circumstantial stuff. Life wasn't ideal. But I ended up hearing about these supplements that were helping people with Hashimoto's and a variety of other things, but I was only listening to Hashimoto's to feel better. And at the time, we were in a financial situation that didn't really allow for extra expenditures, so I kind of put it to the side. But long story short, I ended up giving them a try, and within a few days, I noticed increased energy. I noticed my brain fog lifting. I noticed my mood stabilizing. I noticed that my sugar cravings, which were bad, disappeared. And I noticed my depression lifted. I was sitting right here. Like 1 foot away from where I'm sitting right now, when I remember realizing I feel happy inside. And that's when I noticed the second time that, wow, my happiness is dependent on my health. It's not dependent so much on my circumstances, how much money we do or don't have, on whether I'm living in empty office space at the time or whether we actually have a home. But in that first week, I ended up putting a blanket down on the floor for my kids to take a picnic. I didn't make anything special, but just letting them eat on the floor instead of at the table, because I finally had the presence of mind to do life outside of just survival. So that is when I just started like yelling it from the mountaintops, like, oh my word, there's a connection.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, so I want to go back when that doctor gave you a list of things to do.
Yeah.
Did you go ahead and just like, okay, I'm taking action today? And how was that change like for you? How did you change from, not being gluten-free to gluten-free? And since you had kids at that time, how did it affect your family? Because did they, I'm sure that they supported you in taking away foods that had gluten in it. I'm just wondering how that adjustment was for you and your family.
Sure. So it was a simple shift for me, because I was so tired of how I was feeling that I was motivated to do something differently. And I saw results so quickly that motivated me to stay. It was almost like that super fluffy or gooey, sugary, gluten-y dessert doesn't even look good to me, because I know I will feel awful when I eat it. This over here, I feel so much better. It wasn't a struggle. And also, I had grown up cooking whole foods, cooking from scratch. I was kind of the cook in the family. And so it was a matter to me of simply choosing ingredients that were naturally gluten-free. Vegetables, rice, like just beans, like all these things I knew how to cook with, and just leaving out the things that had gluten in it. So it was a very simple shift. People are often overwhelmed with the idea of going gluten-free. And I say, it's so simple. Just pick the foods that are gluten-free and use those. There is so much variety, so much. And as far as my family making the transition, my husband was gone working a lot. So what he ate out of the house was no big deal. And then I was the cook. So I cooked, basically what I cooked was what everyone ate. And they didn't really mind, because I knew how to cook. Already knew how to cook healthy foods that tasted good from my upbringing. So it was pretty natural. Sometimes I'd have a meal where I ate something different than others, but my kids were small, so for them it wasn't really a big deal. My son, I think, was just a few months old, if I'm not mistaken, like less than a year. So my daughter would have been like maybe 3, so, or not even 3. So at that age, there wasn't much of an issue at all for
Definitely.
them.
That at that age, they're more willing to. They're not as picky, I guess. I mean, there's some kids that are picky, but you just have them just serve what they and see if they'll eat it, and if not, then try again next time, right?
Right. And there, like, I can't emphasize enough, there's so much variety. There's
Right.
so much variety outside of gluten.
Yeah. Yes. There is definitely more options now, and it's like I said, it's more popular nowadays. All the gluten-free items, but then also just like focusing on whole foods is
Hmm.
basically gluten free anyway.
Yes.
So yeah, so you want gluten free, and then you still felt that you needed something more, and this is where the supplements came in. How long did it take for that to take effect? Like for you to notice the changes when you started taking the supplements that you took?
So my husband says I shouldn't tell this part whenever I talk to people because he
Okay.
says other people will expect the same thing. But I'm going to
Yeah.
tell it anyway.
Well, like I
It
said,
was
this is your story, so this is
it's my
how
story.
it
Yeah,
it affected
it
you.
was it was literally overnight for me.
Okay.
I got the supplements in the mail Monday afternoon. So I started them Monday afternoon, or Monday morning, Monday afternoon. And the next morning, I noticed that my appetite had regulated and that my
Mm.
sugar cravings were gone. And then it was Friday night that I noticed that my depression lifted. So from Monday to Friday, I noticed Friday night that I felt happy. It was in between there, in between Monday night and Friday night, that I believe I put the blanket on the floor for the kids and that I noticed energy and that I
Mm.
noticed this mental clarity. And so it was literally overnight for me. It was within days. I was already noticing a difference. My body was so receptive,
Right.
so receptive to change and shifts. So yes,
Well, that's
fast.
incredible. And so for the past, how long ago was that?
So that was December the 29th. This date is so important to me. December the
Yeah.
29th, 2014. So we're
Wow.
going on almost 4 years now.
Yeah, and you've been taking your supplements consistently, and it's been good for you.
Yes, I still have Hashimoto's.
Yes.
You know, I still have Hashimoto's. I still try to be careful with my diet. I have found that I am able to be more flexible with my diet and not watch every single little thing that I eat and
Mm.
still feel okay. Most
You got cut off. Hello. Oh no. Are you there?
Okay, I'm back. I was what was the last thing you heard me say?
Um. Oh my gosh. You feel good? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
I still have Hashimoto's
Yeah.
and I do have I do have a little bit more flexibility with what I eat now,
Mm-hmm.
whereas it doesn't like knock me out or make me feel depressed the next day if
Right.
I like eat something, and so I am more flexible with my diet, but I realize that no matter what we do, like supplementation is a tool. It's not a cure all, it's not a magic pill,
Right.
and that diet and supplementation, the goal with it, with something like an autoimmune disease, is to heal the body. It's not to just feel better. Like
Right.
for myself, I've come to learn more about what causes Hashimoto's and how yeast overgrowth in the gut is one of the main causes of almost every health problem out there. And so
Mm-hmm.
I try and back up and look at this as long term. I
Right.
want to make sure that yeast is killed off in my body, and I want to get to the point where I no longer have Hashimoto's. I'm not there at this point yet, but from day to day, I live without the constant label of I can't do anything because I have Hashimoto's. I am now able to live with, oh, it's there, but I am still able to function and feel happy most of the time.
Right. You know what? Um, I didn't even have the chance to talk about like how like becoming gluten free has affected your gut, and how gut health is connected with, well, we mentioned it, connected with with improving the symptoms of Hashimoto's, as well as clearing your mind, or clearing, well, not totally clearing, but relieving the symptoms of depression and anxiety.
Yeah. Did you want me to touch on that?
Yeah, go ahead and touch on it.
So what I've learned is that the problem with autoimmune problems, is that there are holes in our gut. Our gut is supposed to be a steel trap, that doesn't let invaders in, and it doesn't let the improper things out. It's supposed to be a safe place for waste to pass through, for our food to go through, and the nutrients to be absorbed. And what ends up happening with a combination of yeast overgrowth in the body because of overuse of antibiotics, which I understand was something that happened to me when I was little. I used antibiotic that was later taken off the market. I was on a lot of antibiotics as a kid. Also overuse of sugar and different things causes this yeast to overgrow in the body, and it weakens the wall of the gut. Also chemicals, and there's just so many contributing factors weaken the wall of the gut, and so things get through the wall of the gut into your body that aren't supposed to be there, and then your body attacks them. It ends up that the protein, and I'm saying this in layman's terms because even though I'm trained as a health coach, I still think in layman's terms. So no matter how much education I get, I still think in layman's terms.
Which is a good thing because it's what people understand anyway.
Yeah, so it works out. Is that the protein and the gluten and whatever in the thyroid are so similar that when the gluten molecules get out through those holes in the leaky gut, your body not only attacks those, but it attacks the thyroid too. Right. And so reducing gluten doesn't fix the disease, but it's an important step in the direction of helping your body to not be under attack, so that you can then begin this journey of healing that gut so that those holes can be closed again, that yeast can be killed off. And so that's the journey I'm on now, is this progressive journey of killing off that yeast and building my immune system, and not eating perfectly, but eating with an end goal in mind of being able to live a little and also continue to heal those holes in my gut.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to be too restrictive, right? Because sometimes people get too restrictive of what they're eating. It becomes, what is that called? Orthorexia, where you're just scared of everything. And you don't end up not eating anything.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh, and you asked me about the connection to the mind. Right. So 95% of the serotonin, which is our happy hormone that makes us feel good, is actually produced in our gut. Yeah. So if our gut is leaky and our gut is inflamed and our gut there's craziness going on there, we're not going to be producing the correct amount of serotonin. Therefore, it won't be in our brain and we won't feel happy. And that's why, for me, my husband will be like, hey, do you want some of this? And I'm like, no. Right. Remember, I'm not as nice a person to live with if I eat that or if I forget to take my supplements. And it's simply because of this serotonin production in the gut. It's amazing. I have so many friends that I have coached or that I have helped to get started on their supplement journey who have been able, and again, we can't claim to cure, prevent, or treat disease with any supplements whatsoever. They're not a cure. They're not a magic pill. They're just another tool on the journey. We have so many friends who have gone from depressed to happy, even being able to get off medications. I always, of course, recommend do that under the care of a doctor, not by yourself. But I get really excited about how happiness has more to do with our little gut bugs often than it does with our circumstances and the relationship problems and everything else in our life.
Right. It's definitely incredible, and a lot of research is coming out of that. I mean, I just found out there's a documentary about it that I'm going to start watching. It's available on Amazon Prime. It's called The Second Brain. I think gut is the second brain. I think that's what it's called. But yeah, it's amazing. And the part about the serotonin, I also just recently learned about that. And I didn't even know that most of our serotonin comes from our gut. And if we don't keep it healthy, of course, it's going to affect those happy hormones. And so it's another reason why we should work towards wholesome foods and keep our gut intact. Well, I went a little bit over time because you have so much good information to share with everyone. Just one more question for you. If so for anyone who's contemplating change, who wants to make a change for better health out there, but they're still kind of on the fence on what they need to do, what would your advice be for them?
I would say, just in general, they just want to make a change and they're not sure what to do.
They're not sure. They're like on the fence. I mean, can I do this? Or it's like, I don't really know if I should even do it, if it's gonna work out, or I've tried it before and I've failed. Yeah, along those lines.
Oh, that's such a deep question. I would say keep it simple. Mm-hmm. I find that I often fail when I complicate things. And I know that some people, when they realize they have a health problem and they Google it and they buy every book and they meet with a doctor, it can be such an overwhelming process. Mm-hmm. For myself, I believe the secret to continuing on is to keep it simple. Pick the one or two things that I won't allow in my diet, like gluten. And even there, sometimes I mess up. Right. But pick those things. Maybe don't have a list this long of things that you won't eat if you can't handle it. Some people need to be that strict. Maybe find some good sources, pick a couple things that seem to be the biggest deal, and stick with those, and then give yourself a lot of grace. Mm-hmm. See this as like a long journey, not as a sprint. Mm-hmm. And find some good support, someone that knows what they're talking about, so that you don't feel like you have to do it alone. Because I know for myself, I knew what my diagnosis was, but I was so overwhelmed with my disease that I couldn't really put it into practice for a long time. So get some support and keep it simple.
Thank you for that. Keeping it simple. Yeah, it definitely works. So if people need support and they would like to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
So the best thing to do is Facebook for me. Go to www.facebook.com/Kyla, Kyla.Thorne, Thorne. And friend me or send me a message. Yeah. I use Facebook mainly as my website, as everything. Also email Kyla, Kyla, J, the letter J, and then Thorne, Thorne, @gmail.com. That's the best way to reach me. I check both of those. I'm happy to give tips, support. I do some coaching, and I regularly recommend the supplements that have changed my life on Facebook. And I'm happy to answer any questions with no pressure, no agenda attached.
Great. Thank you for sharing those information. Again, thanks for tuning in, everyone. And my hope is that you got a little bit of inspiration to take action and seek changes to improve your state of health and well-being. Please head to my website, evokestrong.com, if you want to, and subscribe if you want to be notified of future shows. And we'll see you next time. I think we have another show scheduled in 2 weeks, and I'll have more information about that coming up. Again, my name is Elaine Zina. I was speaking with Kyla Thorne. Thanks, Kyla, again, for taking the time out of your day and sharing some good information with us and your story. Thank you so much. And have a good day.